to tonight's Florida Talks at Home series. We're going to give a minute or two for everyone to migrate over from the lobby into the main event. So hang tight with us for a minute. If anyone is having any audio or visual issues, those can usually be solved by exiting the program and restarting it. Inevitably, someone will have issues with their audio. Try leaving and coming right back. That usually fixes it. Hi, Ellen. How are you? All right. Well, we have 6:02, so I think we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to this week's installment of our Florida Talks at Home series. My name is Alex Buell, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator for Florida Humanities. Normally, Florida Humanities works with cultural partners across the state to put on programming like this in person, but obviously that can't happen right now. Our goal is to make this virtual series a regular event until we can begin convening in person once again. Next week's event will be on June 17th at 6 p.m., and we'll have author Arlo Haskell presenting The Vengeance Against Spain, Jewish Immigrants Who Fought for Cuban Independence. You can register for this event on our Facebook page or our website, floridahumanities.org. At the end of tonight's presentation, we have a very short survey. Before signing off, we would greatly appreciate it if you took a moment and filled it out. If you have any questions for the speaker, please type them in the chat field in the bottom right of your screen, and she'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Tonight, we welcome Dr. Martha Bireda, a true grits gal raised in the sun. She's a fifth-generation Floridian and a descendant of one of the founding families of Punta Gorda. Martha grew up in Punta Gorda, attended Old Baker Academy, and finished Booker High School in Sarasota as valedictorian of her class. Dr. Bireda returned to Punta Gorda in 2001 to honor her mother's vision to establish an African-American museum in Punta Gorda, and she helped found the Blanchard House Museum of African-American History and Culture in Charlotte County, opened May of 2004. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Bireda.
Hello there. How is everybody? We usually do this in person, but we're going to do it now, virtual. I am learning to do things virtually, as I suppose you are too. Really welcome. I'm so happy to see you here, or to know that you're here. I have to get into the framework of the virtual. Again, welcome to the African Roots of Southern Cooking. One of the things that I like to ask everybody, and you can't just answer me right now. If you'd like, at the end, you can talk to me about this. But I'm always interested. What makes you interested in this particular topic? And secondly, because I am a foodie, I'd like to know how many of you out there are foodies as well. I love food from all ethnic groups, all cultures. I just love food. And many times when I do this workshop in person, I have people there who raise their hand, and many of them are foodies, which of course probably is why they are interested in this course. Now, I want you also to kind of think about your favorite Southern recipes. I usually ask this, and I have one. I'll just tell you right now, mine. I am a shrimp and grits fan. I love everything that comes out of Charleston and Savannah, Georgia, and shrimp and grits is one of my favorites. And, of course, I'm a fifth-generation Floridian, so I grew up with Southern cooking. So just think about it. When was it that you first tasted Southern cooking? Now, food is just really very important, as we know. It is what sustains us. If you look at any culture, the major preoccupation with members of that culture is getting food. That's what people do. And right now, as we're going through this whole pandemic with the virus, the kinds of things that I am seeing on the news and on Facebook have to do with people being concerned that the grocery stores won't have food or there's not going to be enough meat. So as you can see, food is just very important in our lives. Food is very important for bonding. It's around the dinner table. In fact, I'm sitting right here at my dining room table in my mother's house, and family dinners, it brought us together. And that's what many families do. Family dinners, it's a way, using food, we bond through food. Also, it has to do with rituals. Many times when there are special events in a person's life, food is always a part of that ritual. Identity. Our food preferences say a lot about who we are. One's culture might like something, another culture likes something else. Some things that one culture eats, we wouldn't dare eat. And they will look at things that we eat and say, oh my God, do they eat that? So it has to do with identity as well. And finally, food has to do with pride and political statements. It was during the 1960s, especially when we had the Stokely Carmichaels and Rep Browns who were talking about Black power. They used the term, that's the first time we actually used the term soul food. It came out of the 1960s movement. I think most of us have heard about the Columbian Exchange. It's named for Christopher Columbus, as you can see. And that was when the old world was introduced to the new world. And through this exchange, foods were exchanged, plants, animals, culture, human populations. We know that especially through the enslavement period, technology, ideas, and even diseases between the new world and the old world. So the Columbian Exchange is where we found a lot of all of these things being taken from the old world, came to the new world, and they got plants, foods, all of these things, and took them back to the old world. But in the same way, things from the old world came to the new world. And you can get just a brief glimpse of the way that this happened. You can see, from Africa to the North America, then how things went back to Europe. So this is how the Columbian Exchange worked. Now, one of the things, however, that we don't hear about often, and one of the reasons why I enjoy and love teaching this course, is because it's part of the what we call Untold and Untaught history, is the contribution of the African foodways to Southern cooking and also to American cuisine. So in this course, we're going to trace food from Africa, across the Atlantic, through the Middle Passage, into the cabins of the enslaved, onto the big house, then into the private homes, then north and south. And finally, we'll see how the foods that started in Africa became part of American mainstream cuisine. Miss Spivey, who wrote the book, The Peppers, Cracklings, and Knots of the Wool Cookbook, The Global Migration of African Cuisine, makes this quote: East Africa represents the birthplace of humankind and civilization. And I think all of us know now from the research that's been done that mankind did start, humankind started right there in East Africa. Because that's where humankind began, naturally, that's where the first meal would be. So therefore, Africa is the origin of cooking and cuisine. Now, before we really get into the lecture, I just want to see a little bit of what you know about foods. This is a fun quiz. Now, I have to say that usually at the end of this little quiz, I have all kinds of goodies that I give to the winners. And so for tonight, we're just going to have to see who would have gotten those goodies. So why don't we start? I would like for you have 12 questions here. And the number one is, what continent did turkey originate? And so what you're going to do here is you have these 4 continents, And these are the ones that you would mark and put down a little notation that where you think turkey came from. So go ahead and do that. Where do you think turkey came from? Okay, ready for the next one? Alex?
Yeah, why don't you guys, everyone, just sort of take a minute here and answer the 12 questions. It's the same continent, just 12 different foods. If you want to take a stab at which continent they originated from, and then we'll share the results and see how everyone did.
Thank you. Uh, Someone can't see all of the questions, Alex.
If you scroll down, they should eventually all appear. You should be able to scroll with a little scroll bar on the right-hand side of your screen. And I know you can't see everybody else's answers, but I can see them. And I'll share them with the group here once everyone's got a chance to chime in.
And what I'll do, Alex, is we'll go through them and I'll just give out the answers, okay?
Sure.
And let me know when you think everybody's ready. Then we'll start.
All right. There's no grades on these, so don't worry about being wrong.
Oh no, this is fun. This is strictly meant to be fun. Just fun. So you don't have to think real hard on this, okay? I'm going to give you the answers in a few minutes, and then let's just have fun with it, okay?
Sure. We'll give everyone just another minute. Yeah, I'm not sure why some folks aren't able to scroll. It should work. But I apologize if you're having technical issues.
This is all new for all of us, Alex.
Yeah, I get it. This is our first time. This is our first time doing a sort of a quiz mid-presentation, so it's pretty experimental.
Well, I tell you what. Let me go ahead and do the answers, and then okay. All right. Number one. Okay. At least 54. Okay. Number one, Turkey is North America. Now, some of these are going to surprise you. Tomatoes, South America. Coffee, oh my, I know what you're probably thinking. Africa. Number four, squash, South America. Number five, are cowpeas, black-eyed peas. You have guessed this one, Africa. Number six, okra. You may have guessed that one, Africa. Number seven, maize or corn, North and South America. Number eight, may or may not have guessed this one, watermelon, Africa. Number nine, peanuts, Africa. And number 10, potatoes. Very crucial. came from North and South America. And actually, potatoes, let me say, became really a part of the European diet. They were able to grow in the cold climate and very, very much part of it, as well as maize. Corn was able to be, through the Columbian Exchange, was brought over to Europe, and many times it was used instead of wheat. So going on 11. Now, you can look at sweet potatoes and you're going to say, oh, it's probably Africa. Well, that's North America. Yams came from Africa, not sweet potatoes. And I'll talk about that. And number 12, I know this is going to probably knock you off your feet. Rice, Africa. All right. So now that we have gone through that little quiz, and if you were with me, I would now ask you who had 12, who had 11, 10, 9, 8, whatever. And usually we end up people with at least 6 or 7 of these correct, and then I give out the prizes. So, Alex, we can move on, and let me go ahead and get started here. All righty. Very good. All right. Let's talk a little bit here about African cookery. First of all, as all foods, all food cultures, this is a marker of cultural identity. Very interesting, though. It is being a good cook is about performance and audience. In Western culture, we look at, if you look at some of the shows that are on television, there are some women, but basically we started thinking men are the chefs. Well, in African culture, women were the performers. The techniques of cooking and the recipes, the specialized knowledge were the ones in women's minds. And basically it was an oral art. What you added, how you did it, how you prepared it was passed down by women. Okay, if you take a look here, I can go ahead and take a look at reading it, but I want to just mention this whole aspect of hunting and gathering. As you can see, it was the men who were primarily the hunters, and the kinds of animals that were there. They were the ones who went into the grasslands, and using all kinds of methods, they were the hunters. Females in the culture, however, did most of the gathering, be it fruit or nuts or caterpillars. Remember I said there's some things like, oh boy, caterpillars or termites, they put in their carrying bags. And of course, they had their little sticks that they carried along so that they were able to do the digging. But this is how it all started. It started with hunting and gathering. Now, back somewhere between the 16th and the 18th centuries, what would happen here is that basically the cultures were divided into two. There were the farmers, and then they started raising cattle. And so, people would be hunting and fishing, and raising poultry and domesticating animals. And again, the farmers and those who were gathering would still continue to do that. Now, later, they started not just hunting and gathering, but they started domesticating their crops. And you can see here at the bottom some of the kind of crops that they did domesticate. And there you see rice and you see yams. Another food that the palm oil is something that they use. Many of the diet of the Africans at this age was primarily, let's say the pre-colonial diet, was basically made up of indigenous grains and vegetables rather than meat. Okay, they did eat meat, but their diet was basically one of grains and vegetables. They always focused on a starch. There's always a starch involved with the meal, and we'll talk about that a little later. But keep thinking about the grains, the vegetables, and how they ate. Now, this is the way that they cooked then, and I think sometimes when I see pictures of African villages, many times people still use this very old way of cooking. taking the three stones and putting them around some wood or charcoal, and then you put your pots on them. Basically, they ate a lot of soups and stews. Now, if in fact they hunted and there was a large animal, especially something like a goat, then of course they would dig a pit and they would put the goat in it. They also made clay ovens that they used for their baking. And during the 16th to 18th century, Africans really developed the skill of ironworking. And as you can see, they would make the earthen vessels. I get reminded when I look at this about the pit. I was out in Micronesia some years back, and this is exactly what they did. They made a pit, and then they put the animal in and the breadfruit. I can remember having that, and it came out of the pit. So many of the indigenous cultures probably use the same methods. Okay, steaming, boiling, especially a lot of slow stewing, and guess what? Deep frying came from Africa. That palm oil in particular, and peanut oil. And they would take, as you see, coconut, corn, well, all of these, and the shea butter. They would use all of this in terms of frying. Banana leaves. A lot of times, food was wrapped in the banana leaf and then placed on the fire. Sauces were just, spices were just very important in African cooking. And as we talk about some of the cooking methods that came down, some of the recipes, as we talk about them here on this continent, you can see hot peppers were just a very important part of it. The Guinea peppers are what they call the um, the grain. Those were just really important. And this sauce was one that was mentioned. They like to take hot peppers and onion, a little garlic and lemon juice, and really make a nice sauce. And so that's a sauce that we can try. And one of the things I'd like to say to you as we're going through this, you're going to hear about different foods and whatnot, and it might be fun to just try them. I my ex-husband was Ethiopian, and so I got introduced to a lot of Ethiopian foods. And it's just as you look at foods, and if you're a foodie, and you've got to be a foodie, if you're a foodie, you will probably want to try some of these things that you're going to hear today. Now, for the Africans, we're talking basically the pre-colonial Africans. Starch was the basis of the food, okay? So they would make a stew or sauce to be a stew or sauce, and they would have, of course, all of their vegetables. And then they made something called fufu. And fufu, you take your mortar and pestle, and you pound either yams or cassava, rice, or plantains. And once you've pounded that, you make it into a dough, and then you put it into the pot, which might be, in this case, okra, your greens, always adding some hot pepper, and sometimes they put a little crab meat in it. So this would be a typical meal. So just imagine that. The typical meal would be this bowl. It would have the vegetables around it, and then what you would do would be to dip your fufu or your starch into the stew or the sauce. Okay, what is happening here? Why isn't that working here? Ah, oh, here we are. Okay, very good. Let me go back, see if I missed anything here because I had, okay. All right, Middle Passage. Now, we know that the majority of Africans, the enslaved Africans who came here, came along and came through what is called the Middle Passage from Gambia, which is what we would call modern Senegal, all the way down to Angola. Now, what people don't understand many times It's not that they just went to villages and selected any African that they saw. The Africans who were selected, if you look at where they came from, they were selected because of specific agricultural skills. And that is very important to keep in mind. Why those particular tribes were chosen and where they were chosen from. Okay. I do not know what's happening here with me trying to move my PowerPoint, Alex. Okay, I'm going to have to. Okay. All right. Okra. Uh, Gumbo in the African language. And keep moving there. This is, what's happening here? Okay, here we go. You can see that the gumbo, which is the word, Gumbo, refers to a soup that's actually made from okra pods, and you put a little shrimp and you powder some sassafras leaves. But it was a very popular vegetable in Africa, and it was, of course, brought to the United States from the West Indies. Now, what was usually done is the okra was cooked with tomatoes and onion and pepper, and which is the way that we eat it a lot now. Uh, Many times, you know, you can add, I make an okra soup like people in the Sea Islands do. And if you make your okra soup, you'd have your tomatoes, onions, and peppers. And what you'd also do would be to add some shrimp. And so if there's something like, if you haven't tried this, this is an absolutely delightful meal. It's your okra and tomatoes, onions and peppers, and add yourself a little seafood to it, like shrimp. All right. Collards, mustards, what the Africans call bush greens, were a major part of their diets. And those greens, of course, came over here and were planted here. Still, African Americans in particular love their bush greens, especially their collard greens. These, as you can see here, were a staple in the African diet. They were simmered with the oil, the peppers, put some seasoning in them. And as I said, they're still very popular. Now, remember, like Africans, some ended up in the Caribbean, South America. Callaloo, which is the edible part of the root part of the taro plant, has bush greens. And so if you go somewhere like Jamaica, like we eat spinach, they would eat callaloo, again, though it came from Africa. Now, again, here is yam. Now, the African yams, a little bit different than these. Usually a more of a whitish in color, and kind of getting a little bit more yellow. What happened though is that when the slave people came over, you know, they did maybe on the boat when they would come, they had some of their yams, but they did not have sweet potatoes. However, they adapted. So the sweet potato was very much like their native yam, and so that became a part of their diets. They are, of course, indigenous to West Africa, a major part of the African diet. Religious importance, and also a person who was able to have, you know, large supply of yams. It was also a symbol of wealth, and especially like the Igbos and the Yorubas, they yams were very important, and they would have certain festivals, yam festivals. But as I said before, they did not, you know, once they were here and they were not going back and forth and getting the yams, they started to adapt and they started eating sweet potatoes, which as we think about it, remember we're going back to that Southern cooking. It goes back, candied yams. I think many of us have had those. That's a Southern meal. Now, black-eyed peas. That is definitely uh, African. It is also Southern. Now you see on your screen cowpeas. And the cowpeas is there because originally, like the planters and their families, they didn't eat black-eyed peas. They gave them to the cows. However, because this was a food that the Africans were familiar with and had used, as we'll see some other types of peas as well, this became a specialty. Also, the black-eyed peas, especially like on New Year's, are said to, you serve on New Year's Day, you serve from African culture, you serve black-eyed peas for good luck, and you serve the collard greens for money. And so you'll find that the hog jol is cooked with the black-eyed peas and with the greens. And that's one of those meals that you're going to see on a traditional African-American family New Year's Day. Those were the meals that you will see. And you see here, as late as 901 AD, not only black-eyed peas, but Africans were eating kidney peas, the broad beans, chickpeas, and lentils. And again, you can see here how they use them. They put them in soups, they put them in stews. Now, during this workshop, I came across something on the east coast of Florida, something called red, and it is a black-eyed pea stew that originated, and they still serve it in Ghana. In my family, we'd never heard of red. However, it had to do with this particular family and the groups of Africans who came to this area. They brought this red with them. So red is a stew that's made with tomatoes, tomato paste, black-eyed peas, and then if you want, you can put a little seafood in. I think the Africans put dried shrimp in theirs. But that's a recipe that I will try, especially now that I'm home and not eating out a lot. Trying out recipes, that's one that I will try. Will be something called red. And the pin interest has a recipe for that. I was able to find me a recipe for the red. What happened here? Okay, now this one you probably are going to say, oh my, where did this come from? Okay, all right, coffee. Believe it or not, talking about Africa, coffee came from Africa, and I'm going to tell you that with a story. All right, Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee, right? That's where it came from. Not South America, Ethiopia. And it came from the Kaffa region. And right now, this is one of the special things. I still buy Ethiopian coffee. I buy the organic Ethiopian coffee because it is a very special coffee. Well, let me tell you how it happened. According to legend, the shepherd was out, had his goats out in the field, and they stopped at this bush and started eating these berries. And he noticed that they started acting really strange. Of course, that was the caffeine. And he, of course, took the berries back to the village, and then they started really using these berries. And in Ethiopia, I remember I mentioned the word ritual as it has to do with food. They have coffee ceremonies. You don't go and grab your coffee in the morning and dash out to work. The beans are roasted, and there's a special pot that you put them in, and you invite people, and you sit, and you for hours will go through and drink your coffee. Coffee is very special to them, and it's a way of bonding and a way of engaging in ritual. All right, Benne seeds or sesame seeds. I think some of us have seen those related to the sesame cookies or the candies. If you've been in South Carolina, if you've been in Charleston and gone to the market, you can probably buy the candy or the cookies. They sell them even at the airport there. You can buy them. All right. And we know where they came from. They came from Africa with the enslaved Africans. Again, putting them in soups, foods, making cookies, candies. Thomas Jefferson was fascinated. There was actually a correspondence from him where he had noticed, I guess the Africans down in Georgia had these seeds and they were using the oil from them. And he decided that he really wanted to invest in this, and so he started growing them himself so that he could make his own salad dressing that was, I guess, cheaper than even the olive oil. So Thomas Jefferson was really into a lot of African foods, and also he liked these sesame seeds. Didn't think of it, huh? Guinea squash. Well, I think you can think of the name where it came from. Okay. And different kind of eggplant. Really, the shapes you might find a round eggplant, or might be oval, might be white, might be purple. But they came from Guinea, and they came to antebellum America and became popular. We started eating them, but they were one of those popular vegetables that were eaten in West Africa. One of those vegetables that when you're making your stew, you would put into your stew. Now, Kola Nuts. Okay, I think we all know about Kola Nuts. Are one of our favorite drinks, right? Big plant in Atlanta. Well, take a look at this. Okay, trees, Western Sudan. Uh, our cola drinks, as I've just said, basically came from this. Now, one of the things that when they really started looking at how cola nuts could be used um, to suppress hunger, and I can tell you right now that caffeine and like in the cola can do that. A lot of people will drink a cola drink so that they don't get hungry. I know that I fast about 3 days a week, and those days that I fast are the days that I drink coffee, because again, that caffeine, what comes out of that, is something that is not only a stimulant, but it also can decrease hunger. But the way that it was used in the Middle Passage, you remember 4 to 6 weeks they were on the boat, and the water would become very stale and fetid. And what would happen many times is that the enslaved people would get dysentery because of the bad water. So what they started doing was putting it in the water, and not only to quench thirst of the Africans, but also freshen the taste of this stagnant water. So that's how they started to use it. And as you can see, the level of caffeine in the cola nut exceeds that actually of coffee. Now, I think this one we knew. We think about goober nuts, peanuts. Yes, they originated in Africa. And as we're going through these, I just want you to think of all the foods that you eat and probably never thought about that actually came over in the Middle Passage and came from Africa. All right. Goober is the Bantu word for peanut. And in the colonial days, they were called pinder or goober nuts. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both loved them and called them pinders. Now, the enslaved Africans would take these peanuts and do a lot of things with them. There's still a soup you can make with them, but they made the peanut pie, they made the soup. And let's go back to when we talk about Southern cuisine. How many of you have stopped, usually at a gas station, to get yourself some boiled peanuts? Very good, very Southern, and very tasty. Watermelon. Yes, watermelon was one of those fruits, along with others, that originated in Africa. Uh, the Africans, however, would many times, if it was the watermelon wasn't ripe, then they would eat it in a different way, like a salad kind of way. And then when it was ripe, then they'd eat it the way that we eat it. And I'm having trouble again here. Okay. Now, they also ate, and you can see the foods that they ate, the plums, the tamarind, dates, figs, pomegranates. These were all fruits that were available to the Africans. Okay. How many of you, just think about this, and you can't answer me right now, but how many of you are familiar with the Gullah people? If you are familiar, if you've gone to Charleston or Savannah, along what we call the Sea Islands, all the way from the coast of North Carolina, all the way down to St. Augustine, are where the Gullah people lived. And the Gullah people, because they were isolated on the islands, Sea Islands, were able to maintain their Africanness to a greater extent than other African Americans. And so the oldest African traditions that you will find in those colonies, South Carolina and Georgia. You notice if you've been, like, let's say, to Charleston and you've gone to the market there, many times you will not be able to understand the speech of those people because they are speaking a language, pidgin or a Creole, that is many times a mixture of the West African languages and English. And one of the things that they're very much into their culture. Their food, as you can see, is older than the South and as ancient as the world. That's because it comes from Africa. But one of the things, they are just really good cooks. And so they use those old African techniques in terms of their cooking. Now, again, remember that the enslaved people were chosen because of the agricultural skills that they could bring to the New World, that they could bring to the colonies. Rice was one of those products that enslaved people were very much, they had in their repertoire of agricultural skills. Cultivation of rice was one of them. Now, you see this Carolina gold rice here. Rice made actually the planters in South Carolina some of the richest planters in the colonies. The rice production was huge. So you can see here, when you think about rice in this country, it is very much intimately tied to enslavement. And it was a staple. It, of course, was something that was exported, the commercially. What the Africans knew, because the Europeans had absolutely no, rice was not grown in Europe, so they had no idea of how to do this. But the rice needed a special kind of dikes, needed fields had to be flooded. So just the growing of rice was very, very specific kind of skill. And so the Africans that they brought over knew how to cultivate rice. They knew how to take the winnows, the baskets, and get the outside of it, the brand off of it. And so these people that you will find, especially in South Carolina and Georgia, were people who were very much connected with the cultivation of rice. Excuse me. Now, as you can see here, it's been cultivated in Africa since around 1500 BC. And you see where it was from Sierra Leone, and basically what was this area called the Grain Coast. And here, especially in this particular area, Sierra Leone was the rice coast. And you can see here that 43% of the people who were brought here, especially into the Charleston Harbor, were people who came from rice lands. Um, some of the Gullah people, years ago, they still go back, went back to Sierra Leone, and they still had those connections because that's where they were. Someone that I know, his mother sang a song that had been passed down to her, and it was really sung in that language. And when they went, he took his mother and they went over to Sierra Leone, and it was a weeping song, a mourning song. And when they got there, they heard that very same song sung in the same way in Sierra Leone. And so they were very much able to tie themselves, connect themselves with the culture there from which they had come. Now, here's a very interesting story. This lost strain of African rice. In Trinidad, there are a group of people who had lived in the United States, and they don't call themselves Americans. They say they're Americans, not Americans, Americans. And they live in southern Trinidad, and they are able to grow something called red bearded hill rice. This rice does not need the cultivation skills that the Carolina gold needed. Now, the way that these people got to Trinidad, the War of 1812, well, the British said to some of the enslaved people, if you fight for us, we will give you freedom and give you 16 acres of land in one of our colonies. Those people who did fight for the British were given their freedom and the 16 acres. Now, these little plots were grown, especially in southeast Georgia. They were grown near the house because they did not need all of the intricate kinds of cultivation. I have asked Gullah friends of mine because they do a dish called red rice, in which they, of course, take the white rice, but they use a tomato paste and tomato sauce, and it's very special. If you go to one of those restaurants, most times on the menu you're going to see red rice. So I asked this person who was a descendant of Gullah, if this red rice, if this isn't really you all trying to imitate something that was in your culture years ago. This person didn't know, but that's just the theory of Martha Bireda. Okay, the enslaved, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, they got their cornmeal, some molasses, fatback, salt pork, and this, of course, was given to them based upon your workload. The more you work, the larger portions you got. When I got less, and of course, children were fed kind of in a trough, and they weren't included in this. They were able, though, to grow some vegetables in the gardens, their greens, the bush greens, and then the men, if on the plantation, if the planter said you could, they were able to go hunting and fishing. Also, the unwanted parts of the figs. The Africans did not eat beef. That was not. In fact, the planters thought that the pig was what that was best for them. And they did not eat hams and pork chops. They did eat the intestines, which became known as chitlins, the jaw, the maw, and the pig feet. This is the food that slave people ate. Now, cooking in the cabin. I'm going to skip that one. Let's move on. Okay, let's go to this one. Because it's cornmeal. This was really, and you saw this was part of what they were given every when they got their foods. One of the things that they did was mix this with a little water, put it in, wrap it in something like a piece of collard green or cabbage, and put it on the ashes. And that was what we call ash cake or corn pone. They would also sometimes make a dumpling, and they would put that with their collard greens or their black-eyed peas, or if they boiled it, then they would make hush puppies. Again, and some of my father's roots were in Virginia, and we did eat crackling bread. That's when you had those little pieces of pork, because my uncles had pigs, and they take that pork crackling and put it in that cornbread, and that was pretty good eating. And that crackling bread is that good Southern eating. Kush cake, and we'll move on to the next one so you can take a look at this. All right. This probably come back to my Kush cake there in a minute. Pork was the primary meat, as I said, that they ate. We don't think about it, but many of the Africans who were enslaved were Muslims, and they did not eat the pork. Many had, so as not to starve, they of course had to adapt to eating pork, which was something that they did not eat. You look at, as I showed you, like the traditional foods that were eaten in Africa, you did not goats, you did not see pork listed there. So what the enslaved people did, they smoked it, salted it, and they started to use it. Again, they were basically vegetable eaters, but they would take a piece of this salt or smoked pork and put it into their greens or green beans or whatever. I can remember, again, growing up where we might have just a vegetable meal, collard greens with cornbread, sliced tomatoes, cucumbers. That was the meal. And what you could do, they would season it with the smoked pork. You would do that with green beans, and green beans cooked with potatoes and made a little corn. And some of you out there are like, oh my goodness, she knows what I like to eat. That's some cooking, okay? But also the enslaved cooks made their own recipes again with ham hocks. They put those in the greens. Pickled pig feet, which is a real delicacy. That was something, they didn't get pork chops and hams. They got the pig feet. They made it a delicacy, pickled pig feet. Barbecued ribs, that sauce that they used, that barbecue came from enslaved people. And of course, chitlins, which is a delicacy. The intestines, those what they made a delicacy. Okay, grits. Grits is something that is Southern, and we eat grits in many ways. Okay, we'll move to the next one, but we eat grits in many, many ways. First of all, it was easy to make by just grinding the harmony, but we liked grits. One of my favorite meals, I tell you I'm a foodie, one of my favorite meals is shrimp and grits. When I was growing up, again, a Southern meal was fish and grits. My grandfather liked pork chop and grits. These are all breakfast meals now, okay? A lot of times salmon cake and grits. So all of these were the kinds of things that Southerners would eat with the grits that, of course, came out of cooking in the cavern. Also, this gunter cake, gingerbread tasting cake that came from the Congo. And then I think most of us have heard Hop and John. That was the black-eyed peas and rice cooked together. And again, that's a very popular dish that many times you will find, especially in the South Carolina. If you're in Charleston or Savannah, you'll find that on the menu. Okay, that's that red rice I was talking about. Okay, one of the meals that if you went, I guess, to an African restaurant here is something called jollof rice, and this is something that I still see many of the Africans cook that, and that they use this rice. This juba, this is interesting. The enslaved people on Saturday and Sunday, sometimes the enslaved cooks, they could gather all their leftovers, and they put it in a big pot, and like on a Monday morning, they might go out for the lunchtime for the enslaved working in the fields, and they would take all of this leftover, and that's what they would feed them. And this was called juba. Now, this type of palm wine, I have been looking for it. I have not been able to find it here, although I understand that if you take a look at the bottom of the screen, that this Tanya, there's a root in the Sea Islands of Georgia and South Carolina that has the taste of potatoes that they do make something similar to a palm wine out of. If I figure out, if I'm able to find it, I'll let Alex know, and we'll have to do a show on palm wine. All right, the big house. Um, One of the better jobs that an enslaved woman could have, especially, was cooking in the big house. There was a little bit more prestige associated with being the cook in the big house. Um, they worked there. They were able to bring their different techniques in. One of the things that happened in the big house we got that is part of American, not just Southern, deep fat frying. You think I'm just, as I'm saying this to you, I'm thinking about somewhere like McDonald's or Burger King when they throw the French fries in. Deep fat frying was a technique that was brought, that is American, that was brought from Africa. Again, I mentioned that about the roasting the meats and the salt on the side. That's how we got our American food of barbecue. Okay, after enslavement ended and after emancipation, there were no jobs for African American women other than domestic work. If an African American woman was able to work in a white home, that was a little bit more of a prestige job for her. And so African American women made a way out of no way by working in white homes. This cooking in a white home was more desirable than just basic domestic work. But of course, if they were cooking in the white home, they took their recipes, they took their ways of cooking into the white home. And so that whole period, basically up until the 60s, when African American women could finally work in a bank, could be a clerk in a store, up until the 60s, during the Jim Crow period, African American women, and unless you did go to college and you became a teacher or nurse, African American women basically were assigned to domestic work, especially in the South. Now, Great Migration, 1910 to the 30s, then again in the 40s, and finally in the 60s, African Americans left the South because they wanted more opportunities. There was a lot of racial terrorism, and so they left the South, they went north. Now, you've got this whole 6 million African Americans moving north, and they wanted their own food. And so smart people developed grocery stores and restaurants that catered to these southern migrants. And so what happened then is that this first food cooked in the cabin, then in the big house, then in private white homes, came north and became part of American cuisine. Two people that I like to mention to you. One of them, I every time I tell this story, it fascinates me. Pigfoot Mary. This woman came up in the 20s. She had been a sharecropper down in Mississippi, I believe. She came up and she did domestic work few weeks. That just wasn't kind of what she wanted to do. She came north. She wanted a different life. So she had $5. This is made from, domestic work. She got $1 a day. That was good. She took $2, bought herself an old baby buggy, baby carriage, okay? Took her another couple of bucks and got her a big pot, and then the rest of the dollar that was left just bought her a bunch of pig feet. And what she did was she specialized in pig feet. She could make hot ones, cold ones, pickled. She became, by the time she died, listen to this, she was one of the major property owners in Harlem. Pigfoot Mary. She made it selling Southern food that came out of cabins. Sylvia's, if you go to Harlem, go to New York, it's one of the famous soul food restaurants, and I'd say give it a try. And what is soul food? I think, as I told you, it came out of the movement in the 60s. It is that food that is culturally identified with African Americans. And here's some of it. Think about, look at that plate. Doesn't that look good? Now let me show you something that's on there. If you look to the, I'm looking at it on the left of my screen here. You see that fried chicken, okay? Greens, collard greens. They've got some corn, black-eyed peas. Macaroni and cheese is not a traditional African American food. James Hemings, who was a chef who Thomas Jefferson sent to study in Paris, came back with all of these pasta recipes and using all of these things. So he brought back to Thomas Jefferson the pasta recipes, the kinds of things that they were making in Paris. Thomas Jefferson was a real foodie. And one of the things, even during that period in time, that the mistress of the house, if you were the wife of a planter, you needed a good cook because your reputation in that community was built upon the food that you served. Thomas Jefferson built much of his reputation on the people who were able to come to his house and eat the kinds of meals that were prepared. And this is some of the soul food. Okay, Sunday dinner is just very important in African American culture. And if you think about it, Sunday was the only day that the enslaved people really had that they could take the time and make a meal and really enjoy a meal with their families. It passed down. And so in African American families, like sitting around this table, Sunday dinner was very important. Tablecloth was on the table. My mother put her china out. We used the silverware. Sunday dinner was very important. If you go to an African American church, many times after the service, they serve a Sunday dinner. And you can see here the kinds of things that typically are on there. The fried chicken, of course. We started eating that mac and cheese, the candied yams. These are the kinds of things that you would see. And maybe also some sweet potato pie. Okay, just a little bit here. This is the African guinea fowl, and here's which is very close to the African rooster. But we Africans do like that chicken, and we do absolutely love some fried chicken. All righty, so we introduced this guinea fowl to the New World. And as I said, the fried chicken, it was a favorite Virginia colonial breakfast. That was one of the things that's what you put on the table was fried chicken. Okay, we don't have to go through this, Alex, but I do two presentations. One talks about the chefs that was George Washington had a famous chef, and so did Thomas Jefferson, and then of course the powerful Dr. Newman. Now, before I say goodbye, before you do that, Alex, can you get me back on so they can see me?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted to. What's happening here with me? There. Why did this? It's me, Alex, not you. It's me. There we go. I just wanted to show you all of these kinds of beans and peas. Okay, these are sold at the airport in Charleston, but these are all the peas and beans that came from Africa. And of course, I always have to get myself some of this Charleston. This is that Carolina, that really special Carolina Gold rice. I'm having a hard time showing it to you, but there it is. That's the Carolina Gold. Wanted to show you also, I buy, and I think you can see this here, the Ethiopian, this is the real Ethiopian coffee. And so if you have a chance, yeah, you can see it there. It's going to be, try some things. This is one of the reasons why I like doing this presentation, because if you're a foodie like I am, try some things. And this, I was able, believe it or not, somebody went down, a chef from Charleston went down to Trinidad and was able to find some of this red rice. So I have a few grains of the real, actual red hill rice. And finally, this is something that, remember I mentioned a couple of times the fufu? If I can get it right. All right, see that fufu? I bought this at a South American store right here I live in Punta Gorda in Port Charlotte. This is made from plantains. And so remember I told you, fufu could be made you can make food for everywhere from yams to rice to plantains to cassava root. And this is something that you can make your own. If you're interested in trying out some stuff, if you want to put some fufu in some sauce, then you can actually buy that yourself. So Alex, I'm done. First of all, thank you all so much for coming to the class. I certainly hope you enjoyed, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bireda. And if you didn't notice, I threw up a little survey. If you would take a moment before you sign off and give us some feedback, we greatly appreciate it. And we're happy to hang around for a little while and answer any questions folks may have. Or our presenter will hang around and answer questions, and I'll do my best to keep the audio visual going here.
Yeah, I did something really strange here. I don't know what I did. Oh, okay, great. I see it now. Alex and audience, this is new for me, okay? Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you all attended, and thank you for your comments. Thank you so much. Yes, my museum is closed. We are closed because, of course, for the virus, but we're usually open we close May through September. And Alex, may I mention the website for my museum? Is that okay?
Of course, yeah. Plug whatever you want.
Okay. If you go, we are closed officially for the summer, but because we are a historical institution, we decided that we would do a virtual, just a very short exhibit about the 1918 pandemic. If you go to BlanchardHouseMuseum.org. BlanchardHouseMuseum.org. You can scroll down. You'll see that we're closed. You can tap on that. And we did that because we wanted just to inform people and let you feel a little less anxious about what's going on. So if you feel like it, we open. We don't know when we'll open again. We're probably going to be doing, just like we're doing here with Florida Humanities Council, probably going to be doing a lot of virtual things. But I certainly thank you so much for joining us today. It's always my pleasure. I really love this. And I have to tell you, if I'd been able to be with you, some of you, depending upon how well you did on the quiz, would have gotten some Ethiopian coffee. You've got a can of Coke. You've gotten some black-eyed peas. You've gotten some greens. But thank you so much.
Yeah, some things just can't be replicated virtually, unfortunately. But doing the best you can.
Oh my goodness! I'm seeing here somebody said her husband was a seed specialist. Okay, she probably got 12 of them, and he helped her with the answers. And then here she also said that her grandfather's land patent had a crop of penders. How neat! This is so neat. Oh my God. Wait a minute. Did you come to one of them? You said you got coffee last time? That's wonderful. You got the coffee. Great. Oh, thank you. And thank you, Florida Humanities. Thank you, Alex, for the work that you do. It's very special work. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We've got a few people typing now, maybe with questions, so we'll hang out.
Okay, great. You know, as I'm looking at this, Alex, the thing that comes to mind is, especially with everything going on, Americans, like, we just figured out how to do this, didn't we? We'll figure it out, won't we? We'll figure it out. Oh, for my goodness, right down the street in Punta Gorda. Yay! All right, go Punta Gorda.
All right, well, I don't see anyone else typing, so speak now or forever hold your peace if you have a question. And again, thank you all for attending, and thank you, Martha, for giving this great presentation. And
Thank you for allowing me to do it.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll have you back sometime. And we have a
right.
few more. We have a few more people typing
Okay.
now. Oh, just kidding.
Somebody is typing right now, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Thank
I
you.
think that about does it. Again, everyone, thank you for attending. Thank you, Dr. Bireda, and have a great evening.
All right. Stay safe.
You too. Good night.
Good night.